All right, before we get to the SEC, a couple of big Saturday games. If you want to get free picks via text every day or to a free recorded message, you can go to jimwins.com, and Jim has a free daily sports report. Check it out. All right, let's get to one of our two SEC games on Saturday. You got Auburn playing LSU in a terrific matchup. LSU, a 7-point favorite here. 64% of the early money has come on the home team here, the Tigers. And last year, this was a really strong LSU team. Not a good passing team, but their ground game was terrific, and their defense was top 5 in football. And yet their worst loss was to this Auburn team, and it was an embarrassment. 41-7. The Auburn Tigers just rolled over what was a great LSU defense. The numbers were really horrifying. 566 yards Auburn had on them, and LSU 280 total yards. They got behind and had to pass, which they really couldn't do. That's when we first saw the LSU quarterback, Harris. He was terrible, 3 of 14 passing. And even Leonard Fournette, the terrific running back, he was stuffed by the Auburn defense. 42 yards on only 10 carries. Auburn enjoying a nice 4-1 spread one against LSU, but this is a new season here, and Auburn heading out on the road. They have not been very good on natural grass, 0-8 against the spread, and these first two games for the Auburn Tigers beat Louisville, but boy, was that a close one. They looked sluggish on offense. The quarterback, Jeremy Johnson, was only 11 of 21 passing, 3 interceptions. And even the Auburn defense, which we heard was supposed to be better this year, was not. 405 yards they gave up to Louisville. And then last week's game against Jacksonville State, Auburn was on the ropes all the way. They pulled out a win, but unimpressive overtime game. And again, they gave up over 400 yards. So, Jeff, I wonder, Auburn they say they want to throw the football more. They're not doing that very well, and the defense looks worse than last year. So what the heck's going on?
Well, the Jacksonville State game, it was really a bad situation for Auburn. They were coming off a big win. They have a look-ahead game here. They play LSU this week. It was a sandwich game, more or less. And Jacksonville State was favored to win the Ohio Valley Conference. And so all those things put together, you would say, how can this team been favored by more than 40 points? If Jacksonville State had pulled it out, it would have been the biggest upset in college football history, point spread-wise, because it would have been even a greater upset than Stanford's over SC back in 2007. But so looking at it now, it's not that surprising. Jacksonville State at least stayed in the game for a while. But you never know about these things. Sometimes it looks that way, then the team that's favored wins by 50 points. So you just never know about these games. But Auburn quarterback Jeremy Johnson had 2 interceptions. He's now got 5 in 2 games. Peyton Barber was a bright spot, 23 carries, 5.4 yards per rush. Ricardo Lewis, 10 catches with 76 yards. LSU had a lackluster offensive game against Miss State. They're lucky to win the game. Miss State had a backdoor recovery. That's one of the 2 games. I was 8-2. One of the 2 games I lost was LSU because of that backdoor recover. Also troubling for the Tigers, you would think they would have been totally rested this week because the first game was canceled, but their lack of depth seemed to show on both sides of the ball toward the end of the game. Now you have to play a game with no rest against a team that was almost humiliated last week, so that's not a good situation or spot for LSU. Leonard Fournette had a career best 159 yards, 3 TDs. Quarterback Brandon Harris, just okay, 9 of 14, 71 yards, 5 carries to 48 yards. There's always an overreaction. You have to be careful for overreactions. You'd obviously say, oh boy, Auburn doesn't have it this year. They almost lost to Jacksonville State. But one thing to remember is that what happened one week doesn't necessarily happen the next week. And I don't think LSU has enough offense or depth to cover this number. So I'm going to take the points with Auburn, John. Okay,
I remember that USC-Stanford game you talked about. It was a 24-3 final, 24-23. Was USC was over a 40-point favorite?
Yeah, it was between 41 and 39.5, depending on when you got it or where you got it.
Astounding upset. And when you look back on that game, that was a Stanford team with Jim Harbaugh, and he was bringing in that top-notch talent. So when we look back on it, it wasn't that big of a shocker. But at the time, they were a 41-point underdog. I'm going to take a look at the home team in this one because I was actually impressed with LSU in last week's game against Mississippi State. Granted, it was close, but the couple things stood out. One was the defensive pressure that they got blowing through the line at times. Very impressed with the way they harassed the quarterback. And then it was the ground game. I'm not impressed with the LSU passing offense yet. That was the thing that they've been wanting to work on, and they need to. They've got the wide receiver talent and speed, but this quarterback situation hasn't been able to hit. However, the ground game with this kid Fournette, 266 yards rushing against what I thought was a pretty good Mississippi State defense. In fact, the yards rushing in the game was 266 to 43. Very impressive. So this team could still run the football with an experienced, talented offensive line, and their defense under the new coordinator, Kevin Steele. I expected it to be one of the top 5 in the country like they were last year, and they look exceptionally well. So I think this is a really bad spot for an Auburn team heading out onto the road. Got to believe Les Miles is going to roll that game film from last year and say, see what these guys did to us? They embarrassed every one of you. Let's stick it to them on our home field. And you know the home crowd is going to be into it with LSU 2-0 here. And I like this defensive front. The only thing is it is difficult to play this Auburn ground attack, but Auburn has come out and said we want to throw the football more, which I understand you want to have some balance, but boy, Gus Malzahn has had such a great track record with running the football the last couple of years. Why not just stick to that? So anyway, I'm going to back the home team here. LSU is 4-1 against the spread when they face Auburn, and the home team is 5-1 against the spread when they meet up. And if you like to play totals, they're 11-4 under the total when these two teams meet. But I'll take a small play with the home team here in a revenge, angry bounce back mode. All right, let's get to one of our other SEC game here. This is going to be a fun one. Ole Miss against Bama. They're heading on the road to Tuscaloosa, and Bama opened an 8-point favorite, but all of a sudden down to 6.5 based on the early money. You got big SEC rivalry game, both 2-0 here, and it's a revenge game as Bama only lost 2 games a year ago, but one of them was to this Ole Miss team 23-17, despite the fact that they played exceptionally well and probably should have won the game as they were leading 17-10 in the fourth quarter. They had a 2-1 edge in yards rushing with 168. In command of the game, but they lost the turnover battle 2-1, and Ole Miss had a terrific late comeback to steal the win. This Ole Miss team has a new look with Chad Kelly. He's 21 years old and a mobile two-way threat. And boy, is this offense just clicking. We knew they were going to be good and that the entire offensive line returns and there's plenty of talent. But Jeff, here in week 3 of college football season, you don't find too many teams averaging 74.5 points per game. But this Ole Miss team has won. Can they hang with Bama for the second straight year?
Well, everything changes when you start the SEC play. But boy, I'll tell you, the stats are just overwhelming here. 70 points each first 2 games. It was against UT Martin and Fresno State, but still, Chad Kelly is 20-25 on Saturday, 346 yards, 4 TDs. The Rebels have averaged 635 yards of offense. Defense forced 4 turnovers on Saturday. And the first 2 games are Ole Miss is averaging 7.8 yards per carry. So it's just ridiculous stats here. But as I said, though, when you start conference play, things change a lot. Last year, that big win, 23-17, was part of that 7-0 start for Ole Miss, and they kind of fizzled down the end. They had some injuries. They returned 9 in offense, including the entire offensive line. Bama's coming off that win over Middle Tennessee, 37-10, after beating Wisconsin, 35-17. Crimson Tide also forced 4 turnovers on Saturday. Jake Coker was 15-26, 214 yards, 1 TD, 1 interception, and led by Derrick Henry. They averaged 5.6 yards per rush. This obviously is going to be a tremendous offense so far for Ole Miss, going up against one of the top defenses in the country in Alabama. The thing here is Ole Miss also has a decent defense. They led the country last year in scoring defense. So I think it's not going to be one of my plays because it's right. I think the line just about right. But I can't take Alabama because of the way Ole Miss looked the first 2 games. It's kind of plus their good defense. But I really can't take Mississippi in this situation, a revenge game for Bama. It's going to be no play for me, John.
Well, are you leaning toward an under maybe with all that talk about
under might be the play. As we're doing the show, I don't have a number yet, but if it's under, would probably be the best play in this game.
All right. Well, I'll take a look at this Alabama team, which is so impressive. Jake Coker steps into this pro-style offense. When you look at him, there's really an impressive balanced attack with what they do. And, of course, he doesn't have to carry the load with Derrick Henry, who averaged 5.8 yards per carry. A couple things impressed me. Number one is the defense, which has been so good the last 3 years, ranked number 1, 4, and 6th in the country in points allowed. And they look just as dominant again. And the other thing about Bama, that not only they're going to be home, but what they did in their one step-up game against Wisconsin on a neutral field, that was a very good Wisconsin team, and that was a one-sided game. They won 35-17. The edge in yards was 502 to 268. They really dominated, particularly in the second half as Wisconsin seemed to wear down. And then the rushing yards against what I thought was a really strong Badger defense was overwhelming. 238 to 40 the Tide had the edge in rushing. So this team, once again, Saban has a team that's loaded with NFL talent on both sides of the ball. They will be a powerhouse all season. And they've got this game circled coming in against a team that they probably should have won, beat them last year, but they did not. And when I look back at the last 2 times these teams have played, if you go back to the game 2 years ago, which was last played at Tuscaloosa, it was a one-sided game. Bama won 25-0. They had an edge in yards of 434 to 205, over 2-1, and a whopping edge in rushing yards, 254 to 46. And then last year's game, I already mentioned they had a 2-1 edge in yards. Probably should have won that game. So these games really haven't been that close as far as ground attack defense. Bama has been the better team, and here they are getting down some of these early numbers below a touchdown. I would kind of lean toward Bama in this one, but I also agree that this would be a defensive game like the last 2 meetings, 23-17 and 25-0. Wouldn't be surprised to see a defensive battle, although Alabama overall has not been covering games the last 2 years, but I would think this is one that they could cover. All right, let's tell everybody what we have going on for the weekend. Jim Feist off a terrific weekend, 13-6 run. He's off a 7-2 NFL Sunday, and his high roller plays in both college and football, 6-1 weekend. Those plays alone are $500 online, and he was a sizzling 6-1, including the Arizona Cardinals. You can get Jim's plays and his specials right at the phone number available. Plus, Jeff, you had a terrific weekend too, 8-2 with all plays Saturday and Sunday, or Friday through Sunday, plus an undefeated NFL Sunday.
Yeah, call the number on your screen, just ask for LVSS, and you're going to get a $500 value of Blockbuster Play for only $25. Just call the number on your screen. It's going to be another great week this week. Don't miss out.
All right, make sure you get on board with these Las Vegas pros. Make sure you also look for the NFL version of ProLine on YouTube, as well as JimFeist.com. That'll do it for this week's College Edition. Jeff and I will see you next week with Week 4 of the College Edition. We'll see you then, and good luck with the games, everyone.